One of the things I'm doing recently is I'm having my students produce video documentaries on these kinds of, or video essays on these kinds of topics. And I find that, first of all, I enjoy directing it. I get to play like I'm in Hollywood, directing all these wonderful talents in producing their policy videos. What we've identified in the case of Cirebon is this Big Bang, the decentralization that began already 25 years ago. It's hard to believe it's already been a quarter of a century.
Yeah.
And so much has happened in this past 25 years, much of it positive.
It's notes or recommendation or maybe talking about the books of Cirebon is up to you. And before the closing, at least we would like to have 5 keywords from this podcast from Professor Eric Heikkila.
Okay. Sounds like
this is just like an informal conversation to make it more simple catch by the audience, because the audience maybe the senior high school or undergrad student, or the one who'd like to continue his study in the master program or doctoral program here in ITB.
Very good.
So it's an honor to have Professor Eric Heikkila from University of Southern California here. In the old time, I've been there in 2001 for Practitioner Institute, and 2004 for got CBDI access, collaboration between Institut Teknologi Bandung and University of Southern California. So in 2024, very glad to have Professor Eric Heikkila here in ITB in Taman Sari. So we would like to know more about Professor Eric Heikkila, and of course the University of Southern California. So it's up to you, Professor Eric.
Well, first, it's nice that we were able to welcome you to University of Southern California, and it's very nice for me to be receive your welcome here and those of your colleagues at ITB here on my trip to Indonesia. So thank you very much.
So how's the right now the activities or the program that runs in the USC related with the planning program or continuing education, or the priorities program from USC that in return maybe can help or support the condition in Indonesia?
Well, that's a big, important question, really, because it gets at the heart of what is planning about. And that's a discussion that we're kind of continuously engaged in as we look at the program. We look at core courses that are taught for the program. We look at the requirements. We look at the main streams and areas of concentration. And that's at USC for our Master of Urban Planning program, but also other programs. So, for example, we have an Executive Master of Urban Planning program as well. As the name implies, it's geared to people who have already received in many cases, they already have a master's degree, or certainly they have an undergraduate degree, plus they have perhaps 5 years of working experience or more, and are looking to upgrade themselves, keep current with evolving trends in planning, and to bring their experience into the classroom. Often it's a virtual classroom in the case of our Executive Master of Urban Planning. So because these are people who are working for the most part, and it's difficult for them to take a year or 2 years off in order to be full-time in the classroom. So instead, what we do is we've designed the program that allows them to keep working, keep earning their income, keep gaining that experience, and then we like to think they learn a lot from us professors, but they learn a lot from each other as well, because they each come in with a lot of relevant experience, and then we look to design that classroom experience, that engagement, to be one of cross-fertilization. And so it's coming back to your question, it's something that we think about upgrading all the time. So that Executive Master of Planning program, we've just given it a lot of deep attention. Our department leaders have looked at that and guided the whole faculty in that process. And then this takes place as well at the national level through things like the Planning Accreditation Board. And the Planning Accreditation Board, unlike in some countries where it's kind of government that decides, that kind of runs the accreditation process and decides what schools need to do in order to become accredited, to have accredited planning programs. In the United States, the way it works, and I really like this model, is one of universities themselves, planning programs, academic planning programs around the country and in Canada and elsewhere, but mostly centered in the United States. These planning schools come together. There's an association of collegiate schools of planning.
ACHP.
Yes, so ACSP is the major kind of planning organization. They have the conference annually, the next one to take place in it's November, October in Seattle. And so those are regular events. But ACSP is this, as the name suggests, it's an association of schools of planning. And it's a way where the different planning programs are able to sort of consult with each other about what they see as the challenges in the field, the opportunities in the field, and they think about the evolving issues and also about these kind of accreditation. So accreditation for planning schools in the United States is done by the Planning Accreditation Board. And the Planning Accreditation Board, again, is a kind of a separate entity, but it's overseen by representatives from the Association of Collegiate Schools of Planning and from the American Institute of Certified Planners, so ASCP, and the latter is more practitioners, right? The ACSP is looking a little bit more at the academic side. And it's rather interesting about the way the accreditation process works. So there is this Planning Accreditation Board, and there are board members, and it's something like 7 or 8 members. I'm not sure exactly how many. But there are all these accredited programs there, and these accredited programs need to come up for renewal every 5 years, 7 years, depending upon what they were sort of granted the last time. Yes, you're accredited and up until some point in the future. And then when that point draws nearer, then they look to have their accreditation renewed. And they go through a process. So there are criteria that are set out. So one of the main tasks of the Planning Accreditation Board is to set out the criteria for accrediting planning programs. Do they offer, some of the criteria have to do with the facilities, just the institution, or do you have adequate facilities to offer a planning program? Do you have adequate number of faculty on your staff? And some of the criteria have to do with the curricula. Do you offer courses that address these important topics? And so that's kind of like a checklist of criteria. And what happens first is when the program is notified, okay, you're going to be coming up for accreditation soon. So we ask you, the Planning Accreditation Board asks usually the head of the planning program to prepare the documents, a kind of self-study about, yes, we we feel that we are deserving to be reaccredited, and it's kind of showing how they meet those criteria. That report is then sent to the Planning Accreditation Board. The Planning Accreditation Board then appoints a site visit team. And the site visit team normally has 2 academics and 1 practitioner. And I think I've served on 7 or 8 of these site visit teams. My first one was in February 1999.
You must be the tough one.
I'm getting up there in terms of the number. And one of the reasons I do it is I find it so interesting. It's an interesting way to see what other planning programs around the country are doing. And it's often a very, very enjoyable experience. I mean, I tend to learn a lot. We learn a lot about the planning field. We learn a lot about the specialties of different programs around the country. We learn about, of course, the individuals, the faculty who are there. We learn about the students. So our job then as a site visit team is not to really make judgments ourselves, to make decisions, but we are there actually on behalf of the Planning Accreditation Board. We're kind of there to gather information, to see what, we've got their report, their self-study report. So then we meet with individual faculty members or groups of faculty members. We meet with the students. We meet with the dean. We meet with the provost. We meet with the president of the university. We meet with deans of other programs on campus. We meet with employers of the graduates. We meet with the alumni. So it's a really well-rounded field, and it's 2 to 3 days of very non-stop meetings and interviews. And usually it's a way to then get a sense of what's going on in the place. I mean, in a way, one can only learn so much by being at a place 2 or 3 days, but one's also reading the report before going. We're conferring with each other, so the 3 team members are conferring with each other. What did you get from this report? What did you get from this report? Maybe we should ask about this, and what about, are they really covering this course when so-and-so went on leave and this one's retired? How are they going to cover this course? Not to look to micromanage, but just to kind of see, whether everything's being covered. So it's, as I say, I've been doing this now for 25 years. It was 25 years ago that I did my first one, and so I've repeated roughly once every 3 years at their invitation. They asked me to do it, and it's very interesting. And one of the reasons I continue to do it is I do believe that we are able to be helpful not only to the Planning Accreditation Board, which is sort of we're doing this on their behalf, but we feel it's a chance for the key members of the school, stakeholders in the school and the program that's being looked at, to talk to us, right, and to be reflective, and to, often members of the site visit team have some interesting experiences that they can relate. So I guess the key thing then from all of this, comes back to your initial question about what's changing. In a sense, it's at the individual level. So as a professor, every year that I'm teaching, even if I'm teaching the same class that I taught last year or the year before, each year that I offer it, I think about, what worked well last time, what did not work as well? Are there some new readings? Are there some new topics that I want to bring in? Do I maybe want to have a different approach? One of the things I'm doing recently is I'm having my students produce video documentaries on these kinds of, or video essays on these kinds of topics. And I find that, first of all, I enjoy directing it. I get to play like I'm in Hollywood, directing all these wonderful talents in producing their policy videos. but it's like writing an essay, but because it's a relatively new medium for them, many of the students have not done kind of serious video production, they get excited about doing it, whereas if they were to write another essay, maybe they wouldn't be as excited. But it has the same elements of an essay, and they work in teams, which also is good because then they get charged. It's hard to work in teams writing an essay, but when you're doing a video production, you have someone going out and doing camera shots, someone else doing background reading, doing content, someone else doing the interviews, so and then putting it all together, we get some marvelously creative things from that. So that's at the level of an individual faculty member. We're constantly revising the content and the format and the modality of the classes, but we do that within the framework of the program's structures, and those are evolving, partly in response to evolving standards from the Planning Accreditation Board. They might be introducing, and just this year they're introducing a new set of criteria, and so all programs need to look at that and say, well, how well do we respond to these new criteria? They don't change too dramatically over time, but there are changes in emphasis as the nature of planning evolves. So, but the nice thing about it, I think, is, again, it's not top-down driven, from government saying this is how programs should operate. It's the schools themselves forming this association, and then the association creates the Planning Accreditation Board is answerable to the schools in association with each other, but then this Planning Accreditation Board, which is answerable to the schools in association with each other, they are then responsible individually for meeting the criteria that emerge from this planning accreditation board. So it's kind of bottom up and top down at the same time, kind of almost a cyclical process. And I think that's healthier. It's sort of if you and I and the next person are sitting around and we decide for ourselves what we're going to do, right? And what we're about and what planning is about, and we reaffirm it. And of course, the links to government, because government hires many of the planners we hire. So we're very attuned to what they're struggling with and how planning can help. But also it works both directions. I mean, they're telling us, helps us to figure out what kinds of things we should be addressing in our programs. And of course, some of our best lecturers are folks who come in from government service, maybe are working full-time, and it's amazing. Some of these people who have really top jobs and are really, really busy, they still find it very valuable to come into the classroom and to have a chance to talk about what they're doing, and they're able to enrich the students' experience. And many of the students, especially in something like a Master of Planning program, which is a professionally oriented program, many of the students at that stage of their training are really starting to think about getting a job. So having people come in who are the kinds of people who will be hiring our graduates is doubly meaningful for them. So that's kind of an overview of just how it's been running as long as I've been there. It's this kind of continuous sort of ferment, never quite settled down into any one thing, but it's stable, as they say in French, plus ça change, plus ça reste le même. It's the more things change, the more things remain the same. So there's this kind of continual change, yet the overall kind of system has a nice stability to it.
Okay. Professor Eric, I want to hear about, just like I said before, the trend about the planning there in the U.S.
Yes.
Whether it's still on the green development or more to the technology support for planning, or I don't know.
Well, planning covers a wide range of things. So it's kind of all of the above, but I'd say in recent years, there's been a growing emphasis on social equity, diversity and inclusion. It's both at the practitioner level in terms of what cities are looking to do, and in terms of the kinds of research that's undertaken in universities. So I would say diversity, equity, and inclusion, and kind of this broader issue of social equity. And then that carries across many of the kind of sectoral discipline areas. So whether it's housing or transportation or environment, then those kinds of questions about, well, to what extent is housing, it's a bedeviling problem. It's a kind of shameful for many that we have so many people living without homes, living on the streets. There have been some really well-intentioned people, very smart people going at it, and often with significant funding, but the problem persists. So homelessness is a really main focus for that. Of course, environmental issues, as we have climate change. So there's both the question of the mitigation and also just managing. There's the mitigation and the alleviation, so the reduction of climate change, how it's going to impact us and what we can do to make sure that it's not a growing problem. That's kind of problematic. We've in that their top-down, their goals on top. That is intrinsically a kind of a top-down issue in the sense that it is a global problem. It's literally, right? It is a problem about caring for the globe, and there are certain kind of, if we start at that point of view, which I think is the proper starting point, then that leads us, and we've seen sort of guidance at the international level and in terms of the two-degree target, in terms of thinking about what has to happen in order for climate change not to become overwhelmingly severe. And it's clear that goal that's been put to try to keep the global warming to less than 2 degrees centigrade above the benchmark established from the sort of pre-industrial era. And it's very clear that we're not doing a good job collectively as a global collective of meeting that objective. So part of the problem is how to allocate the responsibilities, because every one of us through our daily actions is affecting the level of emissions, global greenhouse gas emissions. And so each one of us has a responsibility to modify our behavior in ways that are going to help us collectively to meet this objective, to save ourselves collectively. But they say the devil is in the details. So figuring out what kind of climate action plans are going to be equitable and effective, and followed through with in good faith. That's a problem of whenever we get a lot of humans in the room trying to agree upon anything, right? I can't agree with myself, never mind with a bunch of others. So it's a real challenge. So that's another thing that's, it's an important part. It draws a lot of our students in who are really motivated to address issues of climate change, or as I say, issues of homelessness. or other means of sort of developing more inclusive communities and sort of looking to achieve better social equity.
Okay. Then these issues related with the social environment and of course homeless and then housing, does these issues inspire you that previously you said that you are working on books related with one of the city in Indonesia,
Yes.
like Cirebon.
Yes.
Can you talk more about that, Cirebon? Because here in West Java, Cirebon is stated as one of the area that supposed to be as the economic development region as a part of presidential decree around 3 years ago that has been stated.
Right. Well, it's my good fortune to be here now in Indonesia and planning to visit Cirebon this weekend and to meet people there on Monday. So I'm really looking forward to this opportunity. So for our listeners, give a little bit of background on how it is that Cirebon has become a case study for a book that I'm working on together with a co-author and colleague of mine, Cynthia Goitia. She's a professor of urban economics and governance in Buenos Aires, Universidad Torquato di Tella, and in Buenos Aires. And what we're doing is looking at the issue of informal settlements around the world. So the title of the book is Urban Land Management and Housing Outcomes, a Global Perspective. So we're trying to develop a more comprehensive understanding of what kinds of land management practices are going to be more favorable for giving households an opportunity to afford decent housing, adequate housing in the formal sector without having to live in informal settlements that maybe lack many basic services, right? So try to think about how to kind of strengthen the bottom end of the market in a way. And we feel that one way of doing that is by ensuring that land use regulations and building codes are more enabling of the development of affordable housing that's suitable, that meets appropriate standards, but also geared to the incomes of people who are most vulnerable, right? And so it's really a question of allowing higher densities because it's more cost effective to build large numbers of units if you do it at higher densities rather than spreading it out, because you can also deliver services better this way. And so it's a kind of balance. We have land use regulations and building codes for good reasons, but they're not the end in themselves. The end is to provide adequate housing. And if our regulatory structures are getting in the way of providing housing, then we need to reconsider how we devise those. So we think that the best way for ourselves to learn from this is by looking at what's going on in the world. What are some examples of what cities are facing, how they're responding to it, and what those outcomes are, and what some of the lessons might be. So we started with a database of 200 cities that was assembled by a team of researchers led by a Professor Solly Angel at NYU, the Marian Institute. He's done very good work. And he assembled a large team, was working with international development institutions, the UN Habitat, World Bank kind of organizations, working with the Lincoln Institute of Land Policy, and with a whole network of colleagues, a global network of colleagues. And they put together a fabulous data set, 200 cities around the world, and it's stratified by location, by city size, et cetera. So these 200 cities are quite representative of all the major cities around the world, cities above a certain population level. I think it was 100,000, something like this. And so what we did was we went in and we did some analyses of that, using that database of these 200 cities. From that, we were able to create 6 typologies that captured the vast majority of cities out there. And we identified which of those 200 cities belonged into each of these 6 categories. And we then chose one city from each of those 6 clusters to study in detail. And one of the cities was Cirebon. So one of the clusters, Cirebon was in one of the clusters, and when we looked at it, we thought it was actually, we looked at the data, we looked at Cirebon's profile, we looked at the other cities in that cluster, we said, well, Cirebon is fairly representative of what's going on in that cluster. And likewise, we did that with each of the 5 other clusters. So we ended up with 6 cities. Cirebon, here in West Java. We did Kanpur in Uttar Pradesh, India. Yeah. And we did Jinan in Shandong province in China. We did Accra in Ghana. We did Santiago in Chile, and Cleveland, Ohio in the United States. And so right now we've completed drafts of 4 of those. We've not yet done drafts of Accra or of Cleveland, but we have done drafts chapters. So each city, each case study is one chapter in our book. So we have drafted already our chapter on Cirebon. And one of the reasons I decided to come to visit now is because I want to learn from friends and colleagues here how to improve the chapter on Cirebon. I think I did my homework. I read everything I could find on Cirebon, and I took extensive notes, and I thought about that a lot, drafting the chapter. But I know it's going to be possible to improve. I know there are things that we should talk about that maybe we weren't aware that are important issues that we should raise. There may be some things that we've written that are not factually correct. There may be some things that just in terms of the style that might have been confusing. So my mission is to come here to have everyone tell me everything that's wrong with the chapter. Hopefully they'll come back and praise it. But if it's all praise, I'm going to leave here feeling a little bit nervous, But if I get a lot of good critical feedback, I'm going to feel that I'm going to feel fortified, because then I think, okay, I've been to talk to the local experts who really know what's going on here. And already, I've been learning so much just in the last 24 hours that I've arrived, and I've still got several days. So I'm looking forward to it very much. And so it comes with meeting with local scholars, local government officials, national government level officials, provincial government level officials, and of course I'll be going to Cirebon itself. I've been honored to have been scheduled for a meeting with the mayor of Cirebon, and others there. So I'm looking forward to learning a lot, and with colleagues, academic colleagues, of course, from the ITB Cirebon, which is itself a very significant development. And again, what we're looking at is, in each of the case studies, is we're focusing on this issue of housing affordability, land use management, and all the context that goes with it. The key kind of contextual issues that we've identified in the case of Cirebon is this Big Bang, the decentralization that began already 25 years ago. It's hard to believe it's already been a quarter of a century. Yeah. And so much has happened in this past 25 years, much of it positive. I personally am very impressed with what the Indonesian people have been able to do, sort of collectively, to go and just restructure, to devolve government authority from a top-down model to a local model that heavily emphasizes local autonomy, I think is an amazing accomplishment. It's faced with many challenges. It's probably not a perfect model in and of itself. In particular, there are issues of coordination. If every local government can do whatever they want, and there are spillovers and other kinds of externalities and perhaps lost opportunities to jointly manage collective resources. So I think there may be some room there for some kind of collective mechanisms, a little bit like the one we started off our conversation about when I talked about the Association of Collegiate Schools of Planning and the Planning Accreditation Board. That was in a different context that had to do with sort of academic accreditation and things. But that model of autonomous actors, in this case institutions, coming together and deciding to collaborate with each other and deciding to create structures that facilitate that collaboration, even if it means giving up some of our individual autonomy, knowing that others are going to do likewise, and in a sense that what they've given up kind of becomes a common property resource that then can help to guide collaboration amongst these autonomous agencies. So that's something that I think is very exciting, that what I've seen in Indonesia, and I really want to see that succeed, because it's such a bold experiment, and I'm really, I admire the Indonesian people for taking it on. It's bold, there's really no big path for that. And it's an area, in doing the research for this Cirebon chapter, I certainly read a great deal, including from scholars, here at ITB, including Tommy Fearman, of course, but many others who are working in this area. So I've learned a lot. There has been a lot of research done, but I think there's more research that could be done. I mean, this is like a natural experiment, and that's a great opportunity for scholars from around the world. There are scholars around the world who study China, or scholars around the world who study urbanization in India. And there are scholars from around the world that study urbanization in Indonesia. But I think it merits even more attention. It deserves all the attention it's getting, and it merits even more. So that's partly why we're here. And so we're very happy that Cirebon is going to be one of the 6 case studies that kind of shed a light on what's going on around the world. So that's why it's important for me to come here and learn from you all and make sure we get it right.
I still remember that around 25 years ago, USC is one of the universities that support to prepare Indonesia for a new regional autonomy or decentralization towards the new policy in 1999. Because before that and after 99, the Urban and Regional Planning Department and the USC, University of Southern California, has a collaboration in a project of capacity building for decentralization in Indonesia.
Yes. Maybe
by right now using Cirebon as a case study, maybe in turn that can initiate the new activities or collaboration that support Indonesia from the side of USC with working with ITB. So it's a nice conversation, Professor Eric Heikkila. To conclude, I think there are some important things related with how the standard of planning in the US, ACHP, and also the trend of planning there, talking about social and then environment and also housing. But in the end, as a conclusion, I need at least maybe 5 keywords as a conclusion from your perspective related with the planning in a global or how to support the Indonesia in the current condition right now.
All right, let me give it a little thought so that I give you this. One is capacity building, as you just mentioned, because I do think that that's the way forward. And I do hope that we'll be able to work with ITB in providing capacity building. I think that, that, as you say, that's something we collaborated on 25 years ago, or thereabouts, right? Looking at capacity building for decentralization in Indonesia. That's as relevant now as it was then. I think maybe there's more for us I think the agenda of the capacity building may have evolved. And I think the Indonesian side is going to be able to contribute much more on that because it was new at that time, right? And so it was more question mark, right?
Yeah.
Where are we going? What do we need to know, right?
Correct.
Now it can be you also sharing what you've learned with others in Indonesia, right? So just that cross, but also with the rest of the world, including through these kinds of mechanisms, including through materials like the book that we're working on. So capacity building is one. The other key word I think is autonomous cooperation.
Interesting.
So it's cooperation, yes, but this idea of autonomous cooperation where we approach each other as equals and we cooperate because we want to, and we do so with goodwill. I think that's a kind of spirit. So in a sense, as I say, it reflects what can happen in something like an association of collegiate schools of planning. It can be something that happens with metropolitan planning organizations, such as the Southern California or Association of Governments, for example, in the Los Angeles area, Los Angeles region. So that's another keyword. Another keyword I would put, key term, I guess, is urban land management.
Okay.
Because that is a theme in terms of what we're looking at in terms of accommodating housing. Another key word in terms of this kind of conversation we've had, I think, is kind of affordable housing outcomes. And since you've asked for 5, let me make the 5th one. Let me make a continued friendship at our individual level and our institutional level and our national levels.
Okay, this is very interesting to be followed by certain kind of activities which is related with the role of our institution as academic and the research. Oh, okay, the time is up. He said that you have to go to the next meeting.
Oh,
Well,
okay.
thank you,
Very good.
Professor Eric Heikkila.
Well, thank you for a very
Very
engaging-
glad to have you here in Bandung. Thank you. Good afternoon.
Okay. Selamat siang.